I've been waiting for this.
How's it going, everybody? This is another interview we got going on in our interview series with FGC personalities, and today we have somebody that I'm very, very excited to be interviewing. He's a legend in the FGC, Tekken legend, EVO champion. We have Jackie Tran today, man. How are you doing?
Good, man. How's it going?
It's going good, man. I'm glad to actually be speaking with you today. I'm glad you took us up on the offer to interview.
Yeah, I'm always down to speak about my journey and my history and my experiences throughout my career. So let's get it.
All right, well, let's get into it. So, first question, we kind of talked about this already before camera, but off camera. But where are you originally from?
Okay, so originally I was born in San Jose, California, and then as a little kid we moved to Atlanta, Georgia. I would say around 95-ish time, and yeah, that's where I spent a lot of my life. Went to school there, and we ended up moving back west to Las Vegas around 2010. And I spent about 10 years there in Vegas. So I'd say about a third of my life in Vegas and maybe like another third to half of my life in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. And now I reside in San Francisco, California now. And I will be moving back to Las Vegas here shortly. So that's kind of like my journey.
San Francisco, and I hear that's super expensive nowadays.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I've heard people even say like San Francisco is probably more expensive than LA, or is it about the same?
I think San Francisco and New York have been battling as far as the most expensive, but they're both, I would say, top two.
Yeah. Yeah.
LA is not far behind. I would say LA is slightly cheaper than San Francisco.
Okay. Yeah, I've been in the South my whole life, so when I hear people talk about the West, I'm like, yeah, I think I'm gonna keep living in the South if if the expenses are like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you said this before we started the interview, but when did you start getting in the game? And I think you said Atlanta was when you first started learning Tekken.
Yeah, so I started playing Tekken semi seriously or competitively around 2001, 2002 time. So we moved to Atlanta around 95. So I would say I was around 15 or 16 years old, high school. And then, yeah, from that point on, I would say I took it seriously and started competing, traveling for tournaments shortly after that. So, 2002 and 2003 was like my first EVO and like my first like big tournament. And then that's kind of like when I started. So yeah, 2002, 2003 till about now. So like about 20 years I've been like competing for and playing. Yeah.
So was Tekken your first fighting game that you ever played?
I definitely dabbled into other fighting games before Tekken. I would say Street Fighter, like Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 were like some of my, and Killer Instinct, some of my earlier games before I dabbled into Tekken. And I would say Tekken 3 was the one that I kind of started playing a little more seriously. And then Tekken Tag 1 is when I started actually like playing in tournaments. And then Tekken 4 was probably like the first Tekken that I started from day one fresh, because it came out in the arcades and we all kind of had it at the same time, America and, other parts of the world. So yeah, that's kind of like the starting of my Tekken career.
Okay. And what would you say was it about Tekken that made you lean towards it more than other fighting games? Was it just you really like 3D more than you like 2D, or was it the stories? Was it the characters? What really made you jump into Tekken?
I think the execution barrier or how difficult it was to learn the game, and each character had so many moves. So I don't know. I'm kind of weird like that, but maybe like the difficulty of the game compared to other fighting games, whether it be 2D or 3D or not. But I felt like it was kind of like chess a little bit, like some games or some games might be more complex than other games, and it draws certain people, and I guess that's what drew it to me personally. So, and then I kind of maybe the actual fight styles in the game were close to real life as it would be compared to other fighting games. So,
okay.
They actually have real fighting techniques like capoeira, for instance, or taekwondo. So I think a combination of those two things is what drew me to Tekken.
Yeah, that's definitely not how when I saw Tekken, I saw the move list. I was like, yeah, next game. Like
Right, right.
it was just like a little overbearing when you first saw it. Um, so you said it was around 2003, 2004 when you first started doing it competitively, right? Um,
So
oh, go ahead.
no, you're right. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what were like the tournaments that was happening around that time? Like, what were your locals that you were going to? Like, because it's great to hear about like the old school, classic, tournaments and stuff that was happening back in the day. Nowadays people don't know anything about it.
Right, right. So I would say the big tournaments back then were Tekken in Texas, which they call it TIT, which they had an annual tournament there, kind of like they do now, which they have like Texas Showdown and other tournaments
Mhm.
there now. So that was kind of like the big event in Texas for Tekken, and then we had a tournament called Electric Cancel, which is ran by a couple players named Tom Hilfiger and Rocksteady, and they kind of did a recent Electric Cancel for Tekken 7 a few years back in 2019, but that was kind of like the resurrection of the tournament. But those two guys kind of did. And that was California, and then I would say Final Round, if you're familiar with Final Round,
Of course. So yeah.
Atlanta. So that was kind of like the South regional there, and then leading up to Final Round is kind of like our local Atlanta scene. So the reason why Atlanta Tekken is so strong is because I feel like a lot of the strong players and the way Atlanta was demographically, we would all kind of meet up and play with each other, and it kind of didn't care how far we had to drive to play with each other.
Mhm.
So I think that's kind of like what separated us or what drove us to be so strong is that a lot of the top players we didn't care about anything else but just trying to get better, and we all played with each other. And I guess that's why Atlanta has, bred a lot of these strong players or champions.
Yeah, we interviewed Poke Chop before. And just the history of Tekken in Atlanta is always marvelous to hear. Like when I first really started getting into the FGC, my first major that I went to was KIT, but the first one that I went to I had to travel was Final Round.
Hmm.
And then I started doing research on Final Round. I'm like, man, this like Final Round has been going on for a while. Like it has created a lot of historic moments, a lot of history in the FGC. So yeah, I didn't know that you were in tech in Atlanta. So it makes sense why you got one to be one of the strongest players, man, because that Atlanta scene is the truth.
Yeah.
Um,
So the reason why I got really strong is because I ended up moving 5 minutes away from a player named JOP or Johnny in the Pot, and that time he was one of the top players in Tekken Tag One at the time, if not one of the best players in the country.
mhm.
And he played double ogres. He played, ancient ogre and true ogre. So his team was very unorthodox. On top of that, him being so strong. So, um, and I was able to go walk over to his house and lose to him. 100 games a day. And it took me almost 2 years to finally beat him in a tournament. So that's like my in a short term my journey from becoming a competitive player, meeting a champion as my teacher, and playing with him every day. It took me about 2 years to beat him in a tournament. I remember the day like it was yesterday. He was like, "Hey, if you beat me, I don't know if I give you a ride home because we rode together, to the tournament, So, at that moment, I kind of had to make a decision. I was like, you know what, let's do it. So I didn't care. I beat him. Of course, he gave me a ride home, but that ride home was kind of quiet and salty a little bit. And then from that point on, I was kind of like, I kind of took off at that point. But yeah, it took me almost 2 years to finally beat my teacher in a tournament. So pretty crazy.
And
Hmm.
the people finally beating the master. So, but would you say that was the time, that exact moment was the time that you felt like, okay, I'm actually a really good player, or was it actually before then that you realized? Because at certain point, every player has to get to a point where they realize, like, okay, I am kind of separate from everyone else. Like, when did you realize the skill that you
Um,
had?
I think that moment was more of like I was kind of like an equal or passing him at the time. That was kind of like the defining moment for that particular situation. But I think I was always thought about being good, even when I was losing to him, because he was still the best. So it's kind of
Mm,
hard to gauge how good you are based off of who you're playing, right? Because there's always somebody out there that can beat you in this game. So that's also another thing that kind of drew me to Tekken because I always felt like it's kind of like basketball or like any other sport. It's like, if there's somebody out there that you've never met or they've never seen or had exposure, they could beat you. You never know. But maybe back then the top players you know, were known because not a lot of people played the game compared to now. So, if
yeah.
you were good in your area, everybody knew almost. So, but they might not know what your face looked like or, seen you play like we have now where we can see people playing now. So that was like the difference.
Yeah. Okay. And so you said you started playing Tekken in '03. I was gonna ask you the Battle by the Bay series, but I think you weren't playing exactly during that time, correct?
Yeah, so I think the first EVO I went to was the first year it was called EVO. So 2002
Yeah.
and before it was called B2B or Battle of the Bay. Before that, but essentially it's ran by the same people. The Cannon Brothers. They just kind of like rebranded or changed the name
Mhm.
to EVO, and then the following year was the last year they did it in California. So 2004 was the last year they did it in California,
Mhm.
and then they moved it to Vegas. And it's been in Vegas ever since. So 2005 up until now. It's been in Vegas, and it's been called
Okay.
EVO.
Do you know why it moved to Vegas? Was it just
I mean, Vegas is a good place to do events. It's always been that way. California, it's kind of harder to do events because it's a little more expensive to do for people to get housing and hotels and trying to find. It's easier.
yeah.
It's cheaper for people to get to Vegas than it is to California. I would say.
Okay.
Overall, it's good for people because you got people coming from all over the world, not just our country. So you
Yeah.
know you got to think about that too.
So I have a question for you about that. So I used to always think that people counted Battle by the Bay and Evo as the same thing, but apparently a lot of people think that they'll separate the two. They'll say it's a totally different thing. So like I remember one time we did a post and we said that Alex Valle was the first person to be a double champ at
Mhm.
Evo, but he actually did it when it was called Battle by the Bay.
Mhm.
And some people didn't agree with that. They was like, "Well, Battle by the Bay is a different thing. You can't say it was he's an Evo champ." Do you
I
think it's the
mean,
same
from a
thing, or do you?
competitor's perspective, I would say the best players that were able to be there, able to play or were around were there. So I don't know if there was a difference between those two, but as far as like the name and maybe Evo was more international or intercontinental once they changed to that name.
Yeah.
Maybe Battle to the Bay was more regional based, more West Coast based, and then if the players that were good on the East Coast and the Midwest were also good, they would travel to that. I don't know if there was anything more outside of Daigo, and maybe that's he might have been the only international that came. But
Yeah, I think
when it
Vaz
started,
came
when they
also.
rebranded to Evo, there was more than just Daigo that came. So it was maybe they felt like that one counted more. But as far as what Valle and other people did between Bat and Jason Cole and those guys, I'm a competitor who's been playing through all the eras, so I don't look at them any different.
Mm,
If anything, they kind of paved the way for people like me, and then I kind of like carried on to where we are now. So it's kind of like just like I always kind of use basketball as an analogy, but you know, different eras. I don't look at it any different, and all I do is I give it. I know what happened, and I pay my respects to those players because those players they did stuff even after when they changed the name from Battle to Debate Evo. So, you know,
okay. Yeah, I respect, that's why here at TVFGC when we do post and stuff like that, a lot of times it's like a lot of old
Mhm.
classic FGC facts. I just love studying history and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I think
definitely
it's
going
great. We
through.
need more of it. So
Yeah, yeah. So going to 2003, you're going to EVO, and you said that was your first EVO, right? 2003.
Yeah, I would say it was one of my first big tournaments actually. Definitely like my first not I want to say my first major because I went to a couple big ones before that, but that was the one that I kind of showed up and I didn't have as many expectations, but I knew I was still really good. So it was definitely like a litmus test, my first like big test. So.
How many people do you think came that year? Like, it was just a lot of
Um.
people. I'm sure it's not
Okay,
not as much as
so
it is
I
now.
remember 2004, the year I got first place. There we had around 300, almost 400 players. So
Okay,
I would
okay,
say it was around the same. So I would say around 300 so ish players. But
okay.
back then it was a lot harder to travel, especially if you're international. It was very expensive to travel from Europe, so we didn't see as many people from Europe. And then we had one Korean come named Mad Dog Jin. He was the Korean that came. Compared to now, it's kind of the numbers that I had to deal with compared to what people have to deal with now is I always get that question of was it harder to compete or easier to compete in my era than it is now and all that stuff. So but referring to that number, yeah, we had around 300 players for both years. I would say 2003 and 2004. So that was the numbers for Tekken that year.
So you said that that year of 2003, you went there and you didn't expect much. Like, so was it really surprising for you when you did make it to grand finals? Like, was it kind of like oh my goodness, like I'm actually here at grand finals, one of the biggest
Yeah, it didn't
fighting game
really it
tournaments?
didn't really hit me till after the tournament, but funny enough, after the tournament, I kind of was like, okay, second place is pretty good. Maybe I'll be okay just ending it like that. So, when it comes down to 2004, maybe like a week before EVO, I wasn't even gonna go. I was content of just, I got second last year. I'm just gonna leave it at that. And then I didn't even have money to go, and my roommate at the time was like, "No, I'll give you he's like, "You're going. I'm going to give you the money for the ticket, and I'm going with you." So we also played a lot because he being my roommate, we would play each other all the time. So he ended up
Mhm.
getting really good playing me all the time, kind of like how I got playing my teacher every night. So I ended up going. Didn't even have really a hotel room. Crashed on some other player's floor, and I ended up winning. Yeah, and I won from losers. I remember specifically because the grand finals back then were best 4 out of 7. So
Mhm. Oh, okay.
now
It was best
now
part of
it's either 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5. But back then they did grand finals was best 4 out of 7. So
really, it was 4 out of 7, man.
yeah,
Okay.
so they've kind of changed things a little bit now. But yeah, back then it was a little crazy. So, but yeah, to answer your question, yeah, so from 2003 to 2004, the numbers didn't really grow as much as far as entrants go, but um, yeah, that was like kind of like my story between 2003 and 2004, between me getting second and first. So, and I also got very lucky getting the run back. So
Yeah,
it's very
that's
rare, very hard.
That's what I
So
was wanting to ask you about, was the run back. So when you played them that first year in 2003, when you actually didn't win that year, like looking back on that matchup, what do you feel like was what do you feel like happened that you actually just came up short then? Do
um,
you feel like he was just it was, maybe you feel like he was just overall the better player? Was something you just feel like you wasn't making adjustments? Maybe you got in your own head. Like, what do you feel like happened?
um, I think based off our play style, he was kind of like a aggressive, in your face pressure player, like with his play style in general, and I'm more of like a defensive style player. But I think with my style, I would need more info or more reps, I would say, to be effective as him. I would say he would have the advantage, at least off the rip. And then a combination of that, and actually another thing after I got second was I actually like moved into like a kind of like a gaming house with
Mm,
a couple other players after that too. So that difference kind of like put me over the top. So I didn't have that before then. So when I got second, I was kind of like I said before, I was kind of like, look, my expectations weren't as high. I was very happy to get second. You know, the pressure wasn't there. But then that next year, the pressure was on. I can't get anything lower than second.
Yeah.
There's only one place higher than that. But I also had to hold. I had to hold being the best loser. At that time, I was considering, if you're not first, you're last, almost like mentality. But so I took it very seriously after that, in a way. Sometimes you need something like, a place that's not first to kind of motivate you to get to a first, almost.
Yeah, that was gonna you kind of answer my next question. It was gonna be, what do you feel changed from the year you won from the year prior, but you say you basically moved into like a gaming house.
Yeah,
You
I
really
had to
got to the point.
start like literally taking it seriously, playing every day, playing with players, high level players every day, playing other fighting games to keep me sharp. I was playing like Street Fighter Third Strike, and I was playing Mortal Kombat and other fighting games at Dead or Alive at that time, Soul Calibur. I was playing a lot of other fighting games to kind of, I think you need something different to keep you fresh in a game that you're trying to take seriously sometimes. So I think a combination of playing other fighting games and being in a gaming environment and, traveling to tournaments with people that you live with and stuff like that definitely like put things in perspective, where I went from being a surprise second placer to like he's expected to win, or at least like get to the grand finals again, so
Yeah.
uh almost like I had more pressure on me after I got second in a way, which is, kind of weird, but I was ready to take that on because I knew, I could, the sky's the limit if I can get second, like, one of my first tournaments, so.
So I'm sure you couldn't have thought this, at the moment, but like, how did it feel like? And I'm like I said, I'm sure you didn't look at it like this, but looking back in history, you're the second ever main, Tekken EVO champion. We did the post today to where you're actually somebody the only person who actually was able to get revenge on, how they lost the year prior and
Mhm.
stuff like that. Like, how did it feel to finally like break through and win like a major tournament at that time? Like, because looking back on it now in history, it's just it's cemented in history, like your names in like FGC history. So, like,
Mhm.
how did it feel then? And did you actually realize like how big that was? Like that you actually.
Um, I don't think I realized how big it would be for like my career moving forward from that, but definitely at the time after I won, I took a break. Like I was like, all right. After I won, I was like, all right, I'm taking a break. I need a break from all this because I went so hard for the whole year. And I remember Tekken 5 actually came out pretty early. It was like 2005. And we got the game on console pretty fast. I remember like maybe 6 months after that game was on arcade, we got it out. So I remember playing Tekken 5, but I took a break, and a lot of people were wondering, well, where's Tran at? Where's Jackie Tran? He just won EVO. Like, how is he like not even playing like this new game? Everybody wants to see how the reigning champion is going to do in the next game. So I ended up skipping 2005, but I ended up competing in 2006 for Tekken 5, and I ended up getting fifth place. So I ended up making top 8 still after taking a year off. So that was kind of like my journey after I won.
Mhm.
But I definitely wasn't ready for like, I guess I felt I didn't really understand how important it was if I went until now. Like I'm seeing, 20 years later where you guys are doing this stuff, and like I'm like, man, if I didn't get the revenge or if I didn't win, like who would have thought, it's just like sports or anything else, like, there's a timeline, and things maybe might have happened for a reason or not happened for a reason, and I just have to like, kind of had to live with the results. But at that, yeah, I definitely like, if I had to relive it all again, I would not change a thing. I definitely don't regret it. If the formula would be that you have to get a second place to get a first place, then it's definitely worth it. I wouldn't change anything of how it went. But yeah, It was definitely surreal. Like I was young too. I was 19 or 20 when I won, so it definitely
Yeah,
didn't hit me
yeah,
like I would be if I was a little older or whatnot. But I definitely was feeling myself, and kind of like the expectations that other people players had for me. Kind of like put a stamp on it or solidified it. Like, yeah, I'm here. Like probably putting a face to the name. Because a lot of people heard my name before. Like back then, we didn't have social media, or we just
yeah.
had forums, and we had like gaming magazines. Like EGM, or Game Pro magazine, and they would have the results of tournaments in there. So that's kind of like how it was back then too. So
Okay, so Jin Kid, he was the one that you played. Would you say he was like one of your biggest like rivals that you ever played against? He's one of your toughest opponents.
for sure, I mean, he pushed me to get first after getting second because I might, if it wasn't for him, I might not even gotten better than that. I could have fallen off or not even gotten top 8 the next year or not even made it in my pools. But he's actually a good player because even after that moment in Tekken 5 and so on, he continued to do successful. So I would say it wasn't just like maybe like a one-time thing, but he was definitely it was between him and maybe Tom Hilfiger. Tom Hilfiger got third that year in 2003 also for Tekken 4. So the year that Jin Kid got first and I got second, Tom Hilfiger got third and he was a Nina player. And he was the one who also, ran Electric Cancel in California. And he kind of like put Nina on the map. Back then a lot of people didn't know about Nina or like didn't know like how she moved. And he kind of like took parts of how they play Nina in other parts of the world, like Japan and Korea, and kind of like
Mm.
threw his own mix, and he was kind of like the Nina man. So I would say between Tom Hilfiger and Jin Kid were like my two rivals, besides my teacher. But I wouldn't consider my teacher my rival because it just it took me so long to beat him, and after I beat him, it kind of like we didn't really cross paths or play each other that much after that. It's kind of like I kind of ascended after that. So.
Okay. So you kind of spoke on my next question previously when you were saying back during those times you didn't have like social media and stuff like that. It was just, forums and magazines, but when you look at the scene back then versus the scene now, like how do you feel about how it's evolved? Do you feel like it was like tougher because you speak to a lot of you hear from a lot of TOs and they'll talk about like how difficult it was to run events and stuff back in the day compared to now. Like back then, you had probably much heavier equipment. People carrying around like super heavy TVs and stuff. You didn't have a match arena or a start GG. So like how do you feel about the change that the scene has made? Does it feel surreal? Like how far we've come? Like how do you feel like it? How do you
Yeah,
feel
it
about it
definitely
compared
feels.
to back then?
Yeah, it definitely feels surreal. I've definitely been. I'm one of the few people who have kind of like been through kind of like all the eras. Coming from arcade, console, and now we're kind of like going to this online era. So, kind of like for somebody who's kind of been through all three, it's definitely surreal and kind of like something that's kind of also like expected or like it was going to happen eventually, but um because we were talking about Battle to the Base and all that stuff. They would actually bring the arcade cabinets for some of the titles into the event for the tournaments, kind of like how they do now. They have
Mhm.
like an arcade area or whatever, but they would actually bring the cabinets and they would play the tournaments on those cabinets. And I
Mm.
think the year that I got second, which was the first EVO, they kind of started implementing the console. So they started bringing the Dreamcast, they started bringing PlayStation in. So when I started competing, that was kind of like when it started transitioning from arcade to console. So kind of like started competing like towards the middle, the end of the arcade era, and definitely was there from day one console all the way up until now. So um, I think this era now, they have it a little better as far as like, technology. Like, if somebody was to have a combo or some type of tech, that it could be put on social media and could be seen by everybody instantly. So that's something like I think the newer era has an advantage on us older players. Not to say that I'm not used to it, not aware of it, or not scared of it or anything like that, but I think that's one thing that the newer era has over the older era is kind of like the tech and like the discords and all this, stuff that we didn't have back then. So, YouTube and all that stuff. So I would say that's one advantage that I would say, or a difference between the new era and the old era.
Is
And
it?
the amount of players, like I said, we only had 300 people in Tekken the year I won. And then, these last couple Evos we had, I remember 2019, we almost had almost 2,000 players for Tekken 7. And then this past Evo, we had a little less than that, but that's like still amazing because, we've been in COVID or pandemic for a couple years. So just the numbers in general. And then I think the what's the word for it? The access of traveling, right? So I think it was also harder to travel back then than it is now. A lot of players are older now, so they have jobs and flights might be cheaper, or it might be easier to get a visa to leave your country to come to a tournament like EVO than it is now. Or it is easier now than it was back then. So maybe that's why I didn't see as many internationals, because it was just that much harder. So I might have had an advantage there. But
Do you feel like there was anything that the older generation has better than the newer generation?
maybe I mean, I could think of maybe a few things, but maybe one thing is actually playing side to side,
Mhm.
offline in tournaments, because maybe some of these newer players might not be as experienced in that department. Either they came from online, or maybe they just haven't been to as many offline events, so they don't have that offline experience. But I think maybe the older era might have that. But even in the new era, I feel like this newer era, there's a lot more events to get that practice in than there were back then. So there's definitely a lot more events online, and there's definitely a lot more events, or there were a lot more events offline, maybe not as much now, but I think even now there's still more offline events now after everything than there were back then. So there's a lot more opportunities, even locally. We didn't, I don't think the local scene was as predominant as it is now. I feel like the local scene now is a key part of the community from bottom to the top. Whereas back then, I think you were just lucky that you even found a community that played your game in your area back then. So I was just
Yeah.
fortunate enough to live in Atlanta, where we had some of the best Tekken players in the country live there. So I got super lucky. It could have been anywhere else.
Yeah, I know. Like some of the things when I hear stories of like previous generations, you would have to, from where you stay, you would have to travel to the arcade. So if you wanted to go play with everybody, you always had to travel to the arcade, and then when you get there, it's not like you could just play free all day. It's like, nope, you gotta have that money. I can remember the few times I would play like arcades when I was younger. My parents were like, "Look, I'm gonna give you like 6 quarters. After that, like that's it." So
Probably
I
50.
could imagine like having to always have like a ton of quarters if you wanted to keep playing. So
Mhm.
I know that was probably something that the newer generation is like, yeah, I'm glad we don't have to do that.
Right. Yeah. So, they only have to pay $60 plus DLC, and then you get unlimited play value after that, but replay value after that. But yeah, like you said back then, games cost money. So, and you had to wait your turn, so, and sometimes arcades aren't open all day. So you definitely had, if you had to go to school or work, or whatever. So you definitely had to like get that time in, and you had to take advantage of the players, having players there, so can't always just get better by just playing the computer by yourself.
Yeah. So coming into today's time, we see that you actually coach for Two Ugly Esports.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Um,
I've been with the team for, I would say, maybe 6 months now or less. I think EVO was like my first official tournament with the team. So Yeah,
Okay.
I love being part of the team. I love coaching and competing still. Um, I love the group of players that are on the team, and um, it's kind of like when you're a previous champion in a game, and you want to kind of try to find avenues besides just playing once you get older or old enough, like I am now. So I think coaching is another avenue for me to stay involved with the game and the community, and also, I think teaching and coaching helps you sharpen your game up too. So I believe in that.
So you coach more than you actually compete nowadays?
I would say it's definitely more than 50%. Yeah. I would like to be at 50-50 playing and coaching, but I've definitely been focusing more on coaching than playing. Um, I do need to play more to practice more, but I'm also at a. I feel like I've been playing the game for so long that I might not need to practice as much. But practice. You could never have too much practice. You can never
Yeah.
have too much practice, especially in a game like this.
So Tekken 8, we got some information about Tekken 8. They shown a little bit stuff about it. What are your impressions on it so far from what you've seen?
Well, I see Jack 8, which is a good sign. I'm a Jack player from Tekken 7, so my character isn't going to be in the game. Um, Everything that I've seen, I like so far. I mean, the new Unreal Engine. So, the Unreal Engine for this last game has been really good. So I'm excited to see this new Unreal Engine. Uh, Interested to see the storyline with Jin and Katsuya, and you know where's Hayachi if he's there. There's all kinds of uh, things that I'm excited for. I see like the TWT is slowly growing every year, so I'm excited for like our future, maybe TWT or Tekken World Tour for the game. Um,
Do you like that it's going more offensive heavy?
I don't know if I'll say I like it or dislike it. I'll just have to play the game, I guess, to find out. But I definitely am aware of the trend of games in general, or maybe fighting games going towards that direction. Other fighting games like Street Fighter and other fighting games are kind of going in that direction. So I'm not surprised that Tekken is going in that direction. But it's something new, and we're gonna have to get used to, or learn, which is always exciting. Um, I guess I'm excited for the challenge for me being kind of like I feel like I'm a defensive style player, so I'm kind of excited for that challenge for because players are going to have, I guess, easier offense. So I'm gonna have to work even twice as hard on the defensive side of the floor. You know, so
Okay. I'm still sitting there thinking about when you said that because I wonder how much because I wonder how much has changed from those times like from EVOs back in the day or tournaments back in the day to now because I had no idea they was doing stuff 4 out of 7 back then. That
mhm.
sounds like a lot more pressure because so many people can adapt more and stuff like
Yeah.
that when you start playing
Um,
for longer times and stuff like that. So, like anything else that was different, like during those times, how tournaments and stuff
uh,
ran compared to now.
Well, I think streaming and the events being on stream has a big deal. Has a big part of why the number of games that are played now are it is now, because
Oh, okay.
it can take a long time. But I think like 2 out of 3 and 3 out of 5 for Tekken is working out. The way the amount of time it takes for like one game to go. So but it's also Tekken matches can go very fast. So
Yeah.
you know. But I think anything outside of 3 out of 5 for you know semifinals and grand finals would be too much. So maybe it's just right where it needs to be. But I definitely have played through where it's different all the way up until now. So I've definitely seen the process of where it is, where it used to be, compared to where it is now. And I think we're at a good place.
So, besides your Evo title win, what's one of your best memories in the FGC?
Um, Man, I have a lot, but I would say just for Tekken specifically, besides winning EVO, would be maybe E League. So I was a part of E League. I was invited to be on TV for the game Tekken 7. This happened, I think, 2018 and 2019. So it was a few years back, but it was cool because I got to go back to Atlanta because E-League's filmed in Atlanta and I think TNT Studios, Turner Studios. So that was like a whole experience. I'd never been like taken care of so well. They picked me up from the airport in a limo, and they put us in a nice hotel for the whole time. They gave us a tour of the whole, Turner campus. They pretty much took care of us the whole time we were there, and got to be on TV. They showed the event like right after, they were showing the episodes right after Final Four games during March Madness. So it was like pretty crazy. Yeah. And I think the numbers we hit for E-League for Tekken, the Tekken Showdown were, breaking records for esports events, concurrent viewers during that time, and all that stuff. So all that was pretty exciting. I think that was one of my marquee moments for Tekken and esports in general, besides me winning. And maybe I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I didn't do so well in my earlier career. So like I said, I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yeah, and you talked about the Tekken World Tour. That's actually going to be this weekend in Amsterdam. We'll definitely be covering that. Any players you're rooting for?
Well, yeah, I'm rooting for the NA homies. I was just in LA for the regional top 8 because I had our player Genghis Don. He almost qualified. He was on maybe one round away from making it to the top 4, so he would have almost had another chance to fight out for top 3. But Anakin's the homie. I know he lost to Speed Kicks, but he was able to go still because Speed Kicks is not going. So, Anakin was alongside me playing. When I started playing, he was there playing the whole time, but he was younger. When I was 14 or 15, he was like 9 or 10. So he was there through the whole thing. He's been playing just as long as I have, except his dad was bringing us to the arcade, and we were teenagers going to arcade. That was the only difference. So he's been playing that long. So I've known him that long. So I'm rooting for him, and then Joey. Those two are the homies, I would say, and then maybe Nee. Nee's I think Nee's the GOAT. Been looking up to him my whole life playing. Even though I feel like at one point I might have been a better player than him because he didn't really start popping off till maybe like Tekken 5 or Tekken 6. So not to say that he would have beat me in Tekken 4, but it's kind of like we were good at different times, but he's been good ever since. I can never touch him. So I'm rooting for Nee too. I'm a big fan of him.
Yeah, Nee is
those are like my go-tos. So I got to root for the NA homies, and then if I had to pick one person to take it, I would say Nee because this is the one title that he's missing. I guess he's won the EVOs and he's won the Invitationals, but he's missing he's missing the TWT. So I think it might make him even stronger or more hungry.
So last question for you. Talking about final round again, are you familiar with the player Clint the Beast?
Yes, I am familiar with Clint the Beast.
Yes. I remember
he's like the 9-time final round champion for Tekken, I think.
Yeah, they say he won like 8 in a row. I didn't know about him. Poke Chop actually told me about him because I was looking up history, but these tournament standings, they only go back so far. So I wasn't able to go back and see like Clint the Beast and stuff like that. So what era was that? Was he around? Like what games was that? Tekken games?
So he was playing the same time we were all playing. So Tekken Tag 1 and Tekken 4, he definitely was one of our strongest players in the area. And I would say, going back to talking about rivals, I wouldn't say he wasn't one of my rivals, but he was definitely like my teacher's rival. Like if there was one person in the city of Atlanta that would give JLP or Eric the most trouble, it was Clint the Beast for sure. It's just always that one player, whether it's locally or globally, there's always that one player that will give you the most trouble. And it could be somebody that you don't play or somebody that you play all the time. But Clint the Beast was definitely that guy. And I would say the reason why there is a reason why he's won final round for Tekken that many times in a row. But I think once Anakin kind of like ascended and started becoming the best player in Atlanta, he kind of took over and he was kind of like winning the final rounds. And then final round got so big that we started having internationals come for final round, like Korea, Japan, and stuff like that. So it got really hard. But during that time, during that stretch, yeah, Clint was definitely the man, for final round in Atlanta, I would say.
Yeah, the pandemic has changed a lot because, like you said, final round got to a point where we would see like huge players come, international and stuff like that. And I can remember even going to KIT, you had international players and stuff coming. But once the pandemic came, a lot of international people didn't come. A lot of people started to pick their spots and stuff like that. So, I mean, you're really only seeing like the international players and like the best of the best going to like certain tournaments. When it used to be before the pandemic, everybody was going to everything. So
yeah, so
hopefully
it's kind of like come full circle. Like when I started playing, there was a few, and then we kind of hit a big boom where a lot of them were coming, and now it's kind of like come back around again. But I think part of that has to do with certain countries that players are coming from, the restrictions as far as like getting a visa and like being able to leave, go to other countries. Like it might be easier for them to come here than it would be or it might be harder for them to come here and it would be for us to go there, something like that. But I think we'll get back to where it was eventually again. We're slowly like, based off of the numbers that we saw at EVO last year, we took a slow dip, but there were still we still had like over 1,200, 1,300 players. So there was like a 500 player dip between 2019 and 2022.
Yeah.
And I still think that's really good because Tekken 7 has been out for a very long time now. So, it's okay to see a decrease. Yeah, it was going to be inevitable that we were going to get a decrease in numbers because that was literally like the first EVO back. That was the first EVO back in like 3 years, 2-3 years.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the time, man. That's all the questions I got for you and everything.
Okay.
I really appreciate you talking about your history and stuff like that. Because I love talking about this stuff. I love learning about the older players, how stuff used to be, just the FGC in general. I'm still shocked at the 4 out of 7 thing. But yeah, it's great to learn this stuff, man. So thank you for being here. Can you tell the people where they can find you? If you stream your social medias and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do stream. I'm on twitch.tv/ the Jackie Tran on Twitch. I am at Real Jackie Tran on Twitter. Those are kind of like the main two places you could find me. So Twitch and Twitter. You also find me at I'm gonna be at some offline events with the team coming up soon. So I think Level Up Expo is my next event coming up soon, which is in Vegas this month. And then I think we're looking at Combo Breaker. So you'll see me and the whole team will be at Combo Breaker in full force.
Okay, yes, hopefully we can be a Combo Breaker. I've been to EVO. I still need to go to Combo Breaker and CEO. So hopefully,
Combo Breaker is like my favorite tournament, and a lot of other people's. It's
just a
different experience. A lot of people say you have to go to EVO to kind of like experience it once and like be a part of, see how it is at least once. But Combo Breaker is like a different experience. It's more of like grassrooty community, 24-hour casual room type thing. It's just like I definitely think those two, and they're also ran by the same person now. So Rick, the Hadu, runs both Combo Breaker and EVO now. So that's why you're starting to see EVO is becoming a little bit, taking some bits and pieces of Combo Breaker and incorporating it into their event. So you kind of see like the crossover. So definitely, I would say those are the top two events you have to go to at least once. So yeah, EVO and Combo Breaker, I would definitely highly recommend.
I hear a lot of people say Combo Breaker is their favorite. A lot of people say that. And for the exact same reasons. They say it feels more grassrooty. But yeah, I definitely need to go. I definitely want to go. I was a person who was scared to fly not too long ago, but I finally broke that fear, so it's time to go out here and do it.
I know I have so many homies from Atlanta who've never flown or never left Georgia, so I'm like, man, there's so much out there. But the time will come. But Comic Breaker is one of the last few events left that is definitely have to experience it at least once if you want to see what like the FGC is about.
Yeah, but once again, thank you for being here, man, and we appreciate you coming on the show, and thank you everybody for watching. Hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Come back and watch more of our content. Subscribe to the channel, like this video. Peace out.
Peace.